We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I almost wore a suit.
All right. So I was asked by a member of the committee that we wear masks while we're in here. I don't want to be the arbiter of that or mask police. I will say COVID transmission is substantial to high in this county today, so do with that what you will. I don't want to spend time fighting about that. So we're going to say that and move on. So we'll do our roll call. Councilor Ray, I'm here. We have Resident Morgan.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Councilor Roebuck has an excused absence tonight. Resident Hill, not here. Selectman Rennie.
Here.
Resident Stefanik.
Yep.
Councilor Ward.
Here.
Councilor Lunt.
Will be absent.
Okay. We are replacing the councilor from District 5, Resident Pelletier.
Here.
Manager Kroll is not here. Resident Mr. Titus.
Here.
Hello. Selectman Nichols is not here. And Selectman Cesare.
Here.
Did it? Okay, great. Awesome. We'll move on to consideration and, oh. Well, I guess we do have to confirm you now, Mr. Morgan.
I'm not here.
Things are a little backwards here. So do I need a nomination, Larry? Is that what we're looking for?
Just, it doesn't matter, just,
Great.
And I'll second it.
Great. All those in favor of accepting Mr. Morgan's presence tonight? Great. Looks, are you abstaining from that vote?
no, I'm all in favor.
Okay, great. Glad to have you. Glad you're happy to be here. We'll look,
We have Councilmember Roebuck, who is on the, has been nominated for the board and is unable to be here tonight, expresses his regrets, but he had to work, so.
yeah. And my understanding from, oh, there he is, Mr. Kroll, is that at Monday night's Auburn Council meeting, they will appoint a member from District 5. So we'll manage that too. And then I think we'll be fully there, 14 members. Let's do it. Consideration of the September 8th, 2021 Budget Committee minutes. The motion from Mr. Rennie.
I'll second it.
Second from Mr. Titus. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor? We're going to keep those hands up while they pan around. It is unanimous. Thank you. And now we'll move to our budgets. DA.
Madam Chair?
Oh, yeah, what's up?
Just where we actually are under the magic number of 11,
Yeah.
we could just have an agreement if something's actually passed in the affirmative that we are going to make a cut, that we just revisit it at a meeting where we do have that number, just for the record.
Yeah, a cut or an addition?
Yes, either way.
Sure. So anything that's voted on tonight, we'll take a preliminary vote tonight, and then once we have, so 11 affirmative votes binds the county commission, and everyone over here knows that, new folks. And so we try to aim for that if we can, just so there's some sort of powerful message sent forward. So we'll take those votes again, probably on the last night is my guess, just so those who are presenting tonight know that. And we'll start with Mr. Robinson. Welcome.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Andrew Robinson. I am the District Attorney for Androscoggin County. District Attorney offices are a little unique because we actually are districts, and so I am the District Attorney for Androscoggin, Oxford, and Franklin counties. And then our offices themselves are comprised of state employees, the prosecutors, and then county employees who are, and our actual resources come from the counties. And that is part of the historical model that the county attorney used to be a county function, just like the Registry of Deeds or the probate court. And then in 1976, the state came in and said, we will pay for the attorneys, but the counties will continue to pay for the actual space and the resources that the offices need, as well as the support staff. So a little bit different than the other county divisions or departments that you'll be hearing from. But that doesn't change the fact that this year, I clearly kept in mind that I wanted to win the Best Budget Award. And so I'm certain that you have already seen the efforts I've made. And I don't know if after tonight, you're going to need me to come back for the public hearing when you're actually presenting the awards, but I'll be patient either way.
If you want that handshake, you must.
Well, I just, we'll get to it when we get to it. Please, please, we don't want to make this awkward. Some of the lines that I deal with are pretty easy to go through. Would it be, I'll just go through and you tell me if I'm going too fast or in the wrong order.
Let's
But
start
I
off
think,
with 10:05.
yeah, we usually look at 10:05. That used to say Superior Court, and they finally just said, they acknowledged, it's actually my office that's overseeing it. This is a fund budget because one is postage that's simply for mailing out checks when we have witnesses come in and they need their mileage and their witness fees. We try to avoid actually having to do that by actually providing the checks when they arrive to eliminate that. This line used to be much higher, but we reduced it to $100, and you can see how much we use it during the course of a year. The witness fees is a line that can be modified any way you like, and that's because the legislature about 5 years ago passed a law that allows me to reimburse this line from my extradition fund. So the DA's extradition account pays the county back for any of the witness fees that we have to pay. So you could set that line at $1. I'll be in the red for the entire year, but it's going to come back to zero by the end of the year because I just keep paying it back. Or you can leave funds in there like we have historically, and I draw down and then I reimburse it through a revenue line in the revenue section. I would tell you this number, it's hard to predict because we had so few hearings at the beginning of the year. We really didn't reopen the courts for hearings until June, and we didn't start getting our jury trials back on track until June. So we haven't drawn down like we would in a normal fiscal year. So if you were going to try to anticipate, I think leaving it where it is makes sense. But again, whatever number you put, you make that, it's going to be a wash because I'm always going to reimburse that amount.
Mr. Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andrew,
Talking to your
nice
mic,
seeing you
though.
It's very nice seeing you.
again. Maybe we'll get that award for you.
Oh, this is my year. This is my year.
Whereabouts in your budget would this come from? What line? I know we haven't got there yet, but it's where we're talking about this five. Where in your budget would it come from?
Well, I have a restitution account that is outside of the entire budget. It is reimbursed by the failures to appear's default bail, and so it goes straight into an account.
Okay.
And that count is governed by a statute that is maxed out at $30,000. Once it goes over $30,000, I have to turn the funds over to the State of Maine General Fund, and that account is used for paying for my expert witnesses if I exceed the line that I have in my budget when we get to my section. I use it to reimburse the witness fees, and then I use it for extraditions, which is actually what it's intended for. So if somebody leaves the state of Maine, but there's a warrant for their arrest and we have to bring them back, we pay for that transport back.
Is that in any one of our revenue accounts? Do we see that anywhere?
No, it's not an account that the county gets to use. It's a statutorily defined account with a very specific purpose. It is audited with the county's audit whenever we go through the audit process, just to make sure we're monitoring it and there's someone looking over our shoulder. But it's not a part of the revenue, and it's really not an account that the county has discretion over because it's governed by statute, what we use it for.
So, your opinion, if this was $1, you'd still have money for this account?
Oh, well, what will happen is I will dip into it, like I'm going to draw from whatever mysterious fund the county gives me, and then I'm going to give them a check back for it. I tease about that. I'm pretty sure every time I make that joke, Clarice rolls her eyes and wishes I was, that I was an accountant and not an attorney, because I would know
Once
better.
everybody's had a chance to discuss it, I would be inclined to maybe do that very thing, as long as the money's there and we're not hurting your budget, it will take off on the bottom line, at least what's tax money.
I always hint at it, but you know they hate it, right? And
Well, I know,
so,
but the taxpayer, if they don't have to foot the bill, it's being put by another.
but they never will foot the bill. That amount, that's gonna be a net wash. Whatever that number is, I'm bringing it back to whatever you set it at.
Yeah, right, that's what I mean.
Yep.
So if we set it at 11,000, we can spend up to that amount using tax dollars, as opposed to using an account that's not tax dollars. It doesn't
Well,
make
but
sense
that
to-
account is a county account.
I know,
Clarice,
but-
where would I draw from if I did that to you?
That would have to
That
go in the
expense
red.
account.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
would just
Yeah.
be taking like a loan from the
The other
county.
side is in the revenue.
But it would take away from the bottom line.
Continue, but I'm willing to make a motion that we do that, but I'll let the discussion, Madam Chair, go.
Sure. Mr. Ward?
I want to take a stab at that one. Revenue account 9560, witness reimbursement is a direct offset to the expenditure account, so it's a complete zero wash. That's why when he says that, whatever we do adjusting up or down on that account.
We have to do on the
That's the
revenues.
reciprocal anyway, so there is no tax implication associated with it.
What was that number again?
9560.
Thank you.
What tab was that under? I'm sorry.
Under the revenues, and you're going to hear it from
Oh,
me
here it is.
throughout the course of these events, because when we go through, I'd rather not deal with all the revenues blindly at the end. When they reference a specific division, I will bring in that revenue right then, so we can talk about it right there. But under the expenditure and revenues tab that you provided, under the revenues part of that, you'll see the very second and bottom item.
Yep.
Witness fee reimbursement, that's the $11,000.
But if we don't use it all,
Agreed, agreed.
That's what I'm
You
saying,
go
having
negative
something-
and Andy's gonna reimburse, but at the end of the year, it's the same place. But the point is, there's still no implications on the tax.
I think one question that might help us settle too is how are the courts doing witness stuff? Are there Zoom options? Do you have to bring everyone in person?
Well, right
Would it
now-
be reasonable to reduce that line?
The
Given that?
default is people are coming in person.
Okay.
You can make a motion to the court and ask them to allow someone to appear by Zoom, but there has to be a circumstance that requires it. For the
Okay.
most part, everybody's appearing.
It's a high standard. Okay.
And even if they're appearing remotely, they may not get mileage, but they still get their witness fee
Okay.
for that. So there's still going to be a drawdown a little bit.
Okay. So does that change your feelings?
well, I mean, maybe I'm missing it, but it just seems to me it still would
Even-
be cleaner not to have it here, but have, there's already another place in your budget for it.
Well,
It looks like there's two places now that those revenues could go to, this one or the other, or witness, and your,
Well, let me tell you, what there is a revenue line and then an expenditure line. Those are the two places. And so if you get rid of the expenditure, all that's left is revenue line, where I reimburse the expenditure. So,
But the revenue line would go to zero because there's nothing to bring the revenue in if you don't have the expenditure.
it's still there.
And so those two have to even out.
what I love about this is we're having a conversation about where it's a net wash. And I'm always so proud of this. And now,
Mr. Taylor?
And I want to kick him every time he brings it up.
when I start spending your money, I'm a little nervous now, even though I got the best budget.
I just like
Mr.
to-
Titus, can I take another stab at that? In auditing, zero budgeting is a bad idea. So what Clarice is giving you is she's giving you a revenue to offset the expenditures that he's going to incur. You could just as easily actually incur the expenditure and then just wipe it out at the end of the year, but then you have nothing for an audit trail when you're actually sitting in this position to do the budget. She's showing you, for specifically, if you look at 2020's year-to-date expenditures, with the courts closed most of that year, Andy incurred $5,432.
Yep.
That was the amount of revenue that would have came in that year. Year-to-date, we're at $24,8573. We set the $11,000 amount because over that 5-year period, what Andy has historically been around before the courts closed was averaging about $11,000, which is where that number settled. And it's just cleaner from a accounting or auditing standpoint that you don't mix revenues and expenditures to net to anything because you lose what's in that process.
I'll accept that.
Okay. Any other questions on this budget? Did we want to do a motion?
I was waiting for Mr. Rennie. He's usually Johnny on point over there.
in terms of expenditures on 1005? Yes, ma'am. And would you like to loop in the revenues too, maybe? 9560. Great, I love that. Motion by Mr. Rennie. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Ms. Cesare, Mrs., excuse me. So I'm spelling this very wrong, but that's okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? It is unanimous, 9-0. We will revisit that again, but seems pretty convincing so far. We'll move to 1013, restitution specialist.
Restitution specialist is an established position within the office. The reason it's not listed with all the other staff expenditures is because this person works for the other two counties' victims also. This position is where somebody goes out, monitors whether or not people who've been ordered to pay restitution are in fact making their payments. If not, we file motions asking the court to enforce the restitution orders. It's had a significant impact over the years. It's now been about, well, I'm going to say 8 years that we've had this in place, where we are getting more and more restitution brought in for the victims. The reason why it's separated out is because if you look at revenue line 94545, the two counties contribute half of the restitution position salary. So although it is listed here as the full salary, there is a revenue line that offsets half of that amount at 9545.
That amount for this year is $36,025.
So really not much more to talk about. It is an existing position. It's not new. It's been there for years. It's simply separated because the revenue source is different than everybody else's.
And you built in a 3% COLA to this position, similar with our union position.
Consistent
Consistent.
with all of the staff. That's right.
And Mr. Post, we can expect to see that across all salary lines?
Let me explain the salary lines. Salary lines, the 3% was the general, but then you have, in that general fund, you also have steps and grade changes. And so sometimes you'll have a grade change or a step change depending on the years and how long they've been there. And while I'm on that subject, there are some of the, those that are off the scale got a change or a different amount. But the overall normal amount in that salary scale was 3%.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask?
Mrs. Cesare?
May I ask a
Yeah.
question? This is
Can you
bold.
just talk into your mic?
Sure.
Thank you.
This is a bold question. Looking at raises of 3%, these are the same people that are going to get the $5,000 amount of money from the ARP funds, correct?
Yes.
The same year. Is it possible to look at reductions of bringing those folks down to 2% since they're getting such a big added, call it a bonus for this year, to cut back on some of the overall budget for the year?
Let me give you a little bit of history of Androscoggin County. And that is, Androscoggin County has traditionally been way below average in our salary scales, wage scales. When I first got here, for example, the union contract had expired 3 years before. There were a number of issues over the years that, for example, general government people hadn't had raises for a few years. They finally got a raise. 2 weeks later, there was a change made in the amount of insurance that that the employees had to pay, which happened to be the exact same amount as the raise that they were given. And so those sorts of things had been going on in Androscoggin County for I don't know how long. And we're now trying to bring people up a little bit to, so that they're somewhat competitive. And that amount of dollars from the premium fund, and the premium pay, we did a whole lot more than most governmental agencies as far as being open to the public, allowing the public to interact and come in and so on. And our people did not miss time. And so, you know, that was, And of course, by the time you get taxes taken out, it's not that amount of money, it's, two-thirds of it. But anyway, so I would ask that, no, the 3% is a, when you look at inflation, and that's going to eat it up already, so. This was sort of a, if you want to look at it that way, for them working throughout this terrible time, and also to make up some for past history where they were severely underpaid.
Thank you.
Mr. Ward?
Madam Chair, to that question that was asked, listening to Mr. Post's delivery of the summary of the budget, one of the approaches that we take to it in Lisbon that I know also is used in Lewiston, Mr. Post, up to 3%, how much of that is benefits and wages? And if you don't have the answer, could you get that for us for the next budget meeting?
How much of,
Of the 3% increase in your total budget this year, how much of that is tied up in wages and benefits? It's typically somewhere
Oh, I see.
between 40 and 60% in most municipalities. It's a good measure to actually communicate that up front, how much of this budget is, to be able to know how much the rest is actually controllable. And the next piece that we usually chase at the Lisbon level is to the question that was asked, 3% is how much of that increase, to be able to figure out her point going from 2 to 3, it's what's the value of her percentage, to her point, if she was going to make that motion. So we would know X, if 1% is $30,000, 90,000 would be the total increase to get to where she wants to land. And the question that I had originally was not question, pointing out, for the new members in the back, there's a wage detail. And follow along associated with that, because to the point that was made with Andy's division, 3% is what's built into the model. If you see something funky in the account, you can usually figure out if there's an additional body compared to the prior year. It's usually brought out by Andy and the staff for new positions, or something that's an anomaly in that item. That wage detail helps with that.
as we're on his budget and this subject came up, I do have to tell you that due to the way the regulations are, and due to the interaction, the state and county in that one office, his staff worked from home a lot of the time, and therefore didn't qualify under the rules, under the federal rules for the premium pay. And so that department was not eligible, unfortunately.
We initiated a program where we were rotating staff in and out so that if at any point there was exposure, I did not have my entire staff knocked out. I always had the door open and I had somebody at the window, so on the surface, anybody who approached was always going to be provided services. But behind the scenes, I had a rotating staff going through, working remotely, the other half working remotely, and then switching out, so there was never a chance I was going to lose my entire staff at one time.
Administrator Post, did you understand the numbers Mr. Ward is looking for?
I hope so.
You scribbled a lot.
We'll find
so I
out
just
next
wanna
time
make
when I come
sure.
back with the wrong
Again,
ones.
The fact is, I'm looking for the value, percentage-wise, of the 3%. How much of it is benefits and wages? And secondly, if you have a 3% COLA that's in this budget, what's the total value of that dollar-wise for the point that was actually raised?
Right.
Do you mean that for folks outside of the contractual obligation or all?
If 3% is in the model, I'd like to know all.
Okay.
Because the way that we've approached it, and I know a lot of municipalities do, is if you're speaking to one person, you might as well speak to them all. So there's probably a 3% across the board, whether it's contractual or not.
Yeah, okay, cool. Any further questions on this budget?
And do you want to loop in 9545 when you vote? That's the revenue line for this budget.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to adopt the account 1013 for expense and 9545 revenue.
I've got a motion from Member Curl and a second from Selectman Rennie. Any further discussion? Excuse me. All those in favor? Unanimous, 9-0. All right, and now 10:15, the DA's, am I on the right one?
Yep.
Great.
This is my bread and butter budget. This is the one that actually reflects our expenditures and the costs for the work that we do. But you're going to see that we were very conservative this year. One of the significant increases is in line 3120. It goes directly to the conversation you were having. That's our salary line. It does reflect the 3%. The 4015 is our professional fees line. You got to give me 1 year. This will be my last year I do it. But you got to recognize that this, what we did with this line, there's a $594 increase. This is because we are part of a statewide consortium where they run our databases and maintain our computer, our case management software. That consortium is called MEDATS. It also pays for our licenses for OpenFox, which is actually the programs we use to run people's background checks. It's required for us to be able to get access to criminal histories. But the reason I prefaced it with, give me 1 more year of pointing it out, if you look at line 4675, you'll see that that's a $1,000 line. That's because we needed some Adobe Acrobat Pro licenses. It allows us to use PDFs and manipulate them in a way that allows us to preserve the documents and send them off electronically. And we've been doing that more and more, and we've decided we need more licenses for that. But those of you with historical recollection know that that line used to actually sit up around the 20,000 mark. And what happened is we would be paying for the software that we were using, and we were paying for MEDATS at the same time. We have since converted over to Tyler Technologies Attorney Manager. This was all a part of a major conversion to the case management side, the new case management software. And I promised you a savings. Last year, the savings kicked in for the first time, and I'm trying to ride the wave 1 more year and just show to you that savings is still there, where this line now reflects all of the costs, and it's significantly lower than those 2 lines used to be on previous budget years. That is part of my argument for budget awards, but anyways. But you will see 594. What that is the consortium. The MEDATS provides us with their annual budget. We divvy it with all the districts across the state, and our portion of it went up slightly this fiscal year. Then transcripts, no increase. Miscellaneous professional services, no increase. Automobile mileage, no increase. Lodging, last year we took out the extradition conference. Extradition is the mechanism we use to bring people in from other states if they've left the jurisdiction, but we've issued a warrant for their arrest. It is a very complex area of law. It's one where the resources we have to be able to stay on top of that law is not readily available just here in the state of Maine. So I have somebody in the office that is my extradition expert. Every year she goes to the conference and gets all the updated laws and comes back with the information that we need. Last year we didn't do it, obviously, and we cut it out of the budget. This year we're putting it back. So although it looks like an increase, and it technically is, it's really just returning it to normalcy. So we've put in lodging, $800 for that extradition conference. And then if you look at line 4120, you'll see that we added $1,000 for travel. That's all about the extradition conference. And then, I don't want to jump around too much, but I would like you to just see line 4930. You'll see there's an increase in that line, and that is because we are paying for the conference also from there, for the registration. Bringing you back to where we left off with the travel expenses, that was 4120. The electricity is no increase. Telephone, no increase. Rental equipment, 4415, no increase. Office lease does have a $1,062 increase. That's part of the lease that we signed. There's an incremental increase every year. This just reflects that agreement that we entered into when we originally signed the lease. 4675, we've already talked about this line. This is where we're looking to, we had made it a zero line. This year, we're just trying to buy these licenses for Adobe Acrobat Pro. 4820, there's a slight increase on dues. This is what we use for the County Bar Association, as well as a couple of other associations that we have. 4835, no increase on postage. True of 4840, which is printing and engraving. True of 4905, which is criminal investigation. And then 4920, no increase. 4930, which is registration enrollments, I've already touched on with you with regard to the extradition conference. 4335, no increase on office supplies. 4345, no increase on printing and reproducing. 4385 for computer supplies, no increase. And then for 5510, which is our subscription for Westlaw, there's a 5% increase every year on that contract. This just reflects the 5% increase. Furniture and fixtures. You may recall last year we removed furniture from the budget in light of the pandemic and concerns about the budget. This year we're putting it back in. So technically an increase, but it's really just restoring it to normalcy to allow me to cycle through and ensure everybody has proper equipment, but never having to come to the budget committee and say we have to do a wholesale replacement of everything. That same concept is what we do with our computer systems. And so I always buy a set of computers. Every 4 years, we buy a quarter of what we need so that we are never in a position where we have to buy computers for everybody in one fell swoop, because that gets astronomical. So we do it incrementally. And last year, you may recall, we took this line out, and now we're restoring it to the budget. So arguably, and this is just me sitting back looking objectively, it's not like it's my own budget and I'm just giving you, an opinion on my own work. Just objectively, that's an amazing budget, because it simply seems to be a wash, where we've restored the lines that we took out last year and then kept everything the same that was already there. Yep, that happened.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
Just
Mr. Ward.
because he's highlighted it, he knows I'm a fan, but I got the one blemish on your Gold Star Award.
Oh, no, what?
When you're asking for a $4,300 increase on computer software hardware, last year when I was looking through my notes comparatively, I liked your explanation better last year.
Yeah.
You listed specifically in your total justification, 6 to 7 Surface Pros, and didn't list by category like you did last year, how much you expended on each item.
Oh, I see. You want more detail in
Yeah,
the
if
description.
If you're going for a $4,200 increase, I know you go through the cycle part, but it
Yep.
was of great value last time to know, okay, this key item was where that $4,200 hit was gonna come from.
Didn't you cut it out of my budget last time when I gave you the details?
That's irrelevant.
Oh, okay. Ouch.
The memories are long on both sides.
You were searching for a gold star.
I'm gonna get you those details next year. I'll remember that.
Yeah, no, but by all means, that was the one piece. You went through your whole dialogue, and that was the one that just came off, because it's usually the target, is the large capital items, and it's those items at the end. If you're looking for an additional 4,200, knowing that you're gonna go through it, what's the bang issue?
I understand. I take your point.
Mr. Kroll?
District Attorney, could you explain, who do you have for staff here and who's over in Lewiston? And what's the current plan? Is everybody staying where they're at, or do you have anyone here? It's just you're using the space for the courtroom?
Right, you remember when we did have office staff here in the Androscoggin County Courthouse, and in fact, the commissioner's meeting room was in fact my office space. When we went to the UCD, we consolidated the Lewiston office and the Androscoggin County office because everything was starting and being initiated in the Lewiston District Court. Plus, we were dealing with some pretty significant space issues. So that happened 6.5 years ago. We moved to the office space that we're currently using, and our plan is to remain in a single office space for all of the staff.
So in this facility, you're just coming in to use the courtroom?
That's right. We treat it sort of as a satellite office, and so when we're trying cases, we often commandeer the commissioner's meeting space where we have witnesses wait. We have a small office right off the commissioner's meeting room that has a couple of desks and docking stations for our computers and a copier. And then we use that when we're trying cases, when we're doing motions, and when we're presenting to grand jury. So yeah, there's no constant presence in this building. We come in as needed.
Thanks.
Mrs. Cesare?
I have a new person question. Where do your employees on this page, where did their benefit line come into play? I don't see it on this particular budget line. Does it come into play somewhere else that?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I think, can you help me with that? There is a separate line.
Yep, there's a tab in your book, 2025, and that would be benefits.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, the
Because I see some budgets have the benefits built in on that page, and then some don't, so it's a new person question, that's all. Thank
No,
you.
it's a great question, and it is because I remember someone had to explain that to me once. But they lump them together with all the other county employees, I think, in the other line. Is that right?
That's correct.
Mr. Ward?
I remember something last year about a grant position. Is that funded this year with the grant still, or was that an old note to myself?
Or is that on the joint budget?
Yeah.
Well, there is a victim witness advocate grant position. Is that what you're referencing?
I had it on this tab, so I don't know if it was just an old note or not, but it
Because
was.
that has 1019 as the victim witness.
Oh, okay. Last budget year, we had a grant position that was
That ended.
coming to an end.
Ended.
And you graciously allowed me to fold it into our office staff. So that
Not
is now a
applicable.
general fund position.
Perfect.
And there is going to be one more grant position coming up, but I think you were specifically talking about the one that needed to be folded in. So that position no longer exists as a grant.
That was it on
Okay.
expenditures.
And just a quick question about this extradition training. When does it occur in the year?
That is a good question. I think it happens in the spring.
Okay.
It is, the only reason I'm hedging a little bit is because I don't go.
Yeah.
And so our office administrator goes. But I'm almost confident that it's in the spring.
Okay, so oh my gosh, there's not reasonable certainty that it might be canceled in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, I understand.
It's far enough out that we can't make any predictions.
That is.
Okay,
And certainly if there are safety issues or health concerns, then we wouldn't be drawing the funds down.
Right.
We'll leave them where they are.
okay. Any further questions? Mr. Pelletier?
Rental equipment, is that primarily copying machines? Or,
It's a postage machine
Postage.
that we use, and we also have parking spaces in the general parking lot in Lewiston. That essentially is what that
Alrighty.
funds.
In what garage?
The parking garage right on Park Street?
Are we charging for those still? Oh,
Well-
I thought we gave up on parking in Lewiston. Okay, glad to know we didn't.
I will not tell you that it isn't fast and loose, but yes, we are still charging.
Great. Thank you for your revenues.
I'm
Mr.
gonna get some more revenue too.
Yeah, Mr. Titus.
Just a couple of questions, Andy.
Yeah.
One of the questions on the PDF software,
Yep.
and maybe this is for Larry, but generally speaking, a big organization has one contract for everybody to use Adobe or Microsoft or whatever we have for software.
Yep.
Is there such a thing as the county uses one license and then anybody who needs the PDF has the license? Or is it everybody's for themselves when it comes to that stuff? I know we have an IT department.
Well, I can speak to it just for, briefly from my perspective, that I am light years ahead of any other department in the county, and I cannot be constrained with their antique software and computer initiatives.
Upper crust.
You understand. Over the years, I've worked very hard to use technology to make our jobs more effective, right? And help with the need for more, to avoid the need for more manpower and resources. And in this case, I think what you're talking about is enterprise licensing. And
One company, Adobe.
That's right,
They
and-
can have one contract for the entire entire county, that you can buy this, buy that, buy.
And that very model, by the way, is how we brought the price down on the case management software. All the DA's offices purchased like a one-company enterprise-level licensing, so we could have as many users as we wanted, and it really had a dramatic impact. I am unaware of any of the other departments needing the Adobe software like we do. And typically, to get to the enterprise level or the single licensing for an entire agency, it is more costly than sort of buying one or two licenses. It's usually when you're at a tipping point where you're buying a significant number, in my head, in the state of
I know they
Maine.
have the free version, which everybody can get, you just download it, but then when they have the professional versions that most
Right.
businesses need, I know in my business, we had a license, and maybe you had 100 or 200 licenses, because you had all these people in a big company that needed to use the upgraded versions.
I'm not even sure
Do that?
any of the other departments know how to use computers, so that's, are they here? Are they here? Okay, okay. Too far, too much, too much?
But quite frankly, I can't think of, off the top of my head, any others that actually use that particular
Well,
program,
that particular
because we don't need to.
Adobe makes a lot of different products, and I didn't know. So we don't, just everybody spends for themselves, that's the question.
I believe that's correct.
Well, there is a history of us pooling our resources, though, like Mr. Cody did with our printers, and developed a system where we're all using the same services. So I think when it's been identified as a way to save money, they've done it. I doubt anybody uses the Adobe Pro like we're gonna be
Okay.
to a level that, or a degree that where they need.
And then the last question I had, and this again goes maybe to Larry, but on electricity and phone, are they still, is that move, I know for a while that was a moving target, we never knew where we were gonna be one year to the next. And so, obviously, in 2020, we didn't spend anywhere near the money we allocated. This year, we may come close, but if it's even a little bit over, it's still gonna be a $3,000 surplus in that account. And then telephones the same way, we were like $5,000, $6,000 over on our budget for telephone, and now this year, we're carrying that forward again and again and again. So I guess my point is, well, we've got a 12.5% tax levy coming, percentage increase. Anything we can do to lower what we think it's going to be is gonna help the tax levy. So
Yeah.
if we're gonna continue to have $3,000 and $5,000 extra money in budgets, that's what's gonna go to the bottom line, So I was gonna ask if those can be reduced any, or as far as you're concerned, no, it'd be too dangerous. Because I know we're not gonna shut the power off, if for some reason you build it in the.
No, I appreciate that
So,
concern.
But if we reduce the budget, we reduce the levy.
Yeah, and frankly, when we're sort of stuck in the middle here, right? Because we had, in 2020, 3 months into it, we had an interruption with the number of people drawing on these services. And then we creeped into 2021, expecting everything was going to return over. It took a while to get there. So I'm not sure the numbers accurately reflect how much everybody being in the office all at the same time for a full calendar year is going to, how much they're going to draw down. On the other hand, I appreciate your point. And if you said to me, well, look, can we try taking, 2,000 off the electricity and then come back next year and get a sense of it? Did I go over budget? As long as you promise not to yell at me when you say, oh, here comes Mr. Moneybags. Yeah. I don't mind saying, hey, look, we're seeing a pattern, so why don't we try cutting it back, tapering back? I'd ask that we do it modestly, but you know what we're trying to do. These are accounts where we just want to make sure, we have what we need to keep the phones and the lights on.
And I just wanted something that, I'd like to make a motion then.
Yeah,
That
let's hear it.
we make an adjustment to line 4305
Yeah.
for $2,000 and 4315 for $2,000. Would that be fair?
That's fine. Yeah.
It would be for that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
On electricity, is it electric heat? My concern there is it's been 2 soft winters associated with that, with fairly mild. I would support the telephone dropping that, but with CMP just increasing the distribution charge by 2% this month,
Yep.
I don't know if I would actually want to live there with an electric heat type of situation at this point.
Can I make a quick comment on the electric part?
Yeah.
So,
Are you talking into a mic, though?
Directly.
speak a little louder.
You made me do this.
Since the DA's office worked primarily remotely, The AC wasn't needed as much, the electricity wasn't needed because the computers were actually at their homes, not at work. The printers weren't being used, the photocopiers weren't being used, all these things that take electricity weren't being used. So now that they're back in the office, the electricity is gonna start going up again. So a lot of it's based on usage.
Well, I'm seeing also we're at 6,100, and this is generally through August. So we're not even half, close to half in the electricity, for example, in 2021. And if this is through August, I mean, we're still quite a bit behind.
Even if the heat's turned on in November, December, that would be quite a chunk to heat up all of a sudden.
I'll tell you what, I'll tell my folks, next fiscal year, hey, you're gonna have to put some sweaters on, right? We're gonna get to January 1, and you can put the heat back
Play
on.
defense on that thermostat.
You need a second.
So I had a second, so a motion by Mr. Titus, a second by Mr. Rennie to bring line 4305 to $11,000 as an expenditure and 4315 to $25,000
Yeah.
as an expenditure.
Yep.
Further discussion on that amendment?
Can we vote on them independently? You have my support for the first one. I will-
Okay.
I will vote against. I don't
How do
wanna
you
vote
feel
against
about that?
both.
Uncoupling.
Well, only if we can accept a friendly amendment, because I would think about, I think telephone, there's a lot more wiggle room than there is electricity in the way you said it. So I'd be willing to go 3 on telephone and 1 on electricity.
You have my vote.
Okay, so now we're
But
at,
I'm not involved. I'm not involved with either the amendment or the second.
so I hear, I feel like I'm auctioning this. So 12K for the electricity and 24K for the telephone?
Yes, I will take that, my amendment changed to that.
You agree to that? Okay, great. We're just going to call that friendly. Any further questions on that? We're voting on both line items together. All those in favor? All right, that is unanimous, 9-0. And so what does that bring your total to? 726, 688. Any further?
And one question,
Yeah,
Madam Chair.
go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to ask about the automobile mileage.
Yep.
Of course, obviously, in 2020, we didn't do much, and we haven't done much in 2021. Is it something that's going to change with the remote stuff, and everybody maybe doesn't have to travel? We learned some lessons, so we may not have to travel as much? Is there any reduction there, or do you think we're still going to spend?
I'll tell you, it's linked primarily with the courts, and so if the courts say to me, and frankly, they have said, we're, doing less and less by way of video and requiring more and more in presence, under those circumstances, I really can't guess for you what 2022 is going to look like. To date, we were pretty actively doing things remotely through May, and then the beginning of June, we started, the courts opened back up and started requiring us to be present in the courtroom. Courts, we're now picking juries, this is to expect the mileage to kick in.
Well, I have noticed in the past that was much higher.
Yeah.
In the past years, in the past few, so.
So I would ask that we leave that there, recognizing the same concept, that, hey, if the pattern is that we're generally not using as much, we should start tapering it down.
Yep.
I would ask that we not do it this year, but with 2022, it will certainly be on the table to say, if we're not seeing that increase, then we should start tapering that line down.
Very good. Thank you very much.
And I'm not sure if my cooperation goes towards the award considerations. I'm just putting out, man, have I been cooperative with these guys.
This rubric is getting complicated. Yes, Mr. Rennie. All right, I have a motion to accept for, in the amount of $726,688. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mrs. Cesare, thank you. Any further discussion on this budget?
Yes,
Mr. Ward,
not on this vote, but on this budget.
let's hear it.
Just revenues being done separately, and capital items that don't foot to what the capital expenditure tab that we have as well. So let's vote on this item, and I'll get into those.
Okay, that sounds great. We'll make time for that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Mr. Ward, go ahead.
9555, with disposition.
Deferred disposition
deferred
fees. Yep.
disposition. I'm noting a $10,000 drop, but what I'm not seeing in the content from Mr. Post is any 2022 actual revenues as we got in the previous year. Looking back at what we got last year, I'm noting clearly in that line item that 2020, with the courts being closed as they are, that revenue took a pretty substantial drop. But in the 2017 to 19 period, where we had actuals, it was somewhere between $52,000 and $70,000. Now that the courts are back open again, I would like to see what actuals look like, and I would make the motion to keep it at $50,000 with an optimism that the courts actually be open, and if it doesn't work out that way, that you're not held liable for me doing that to you.
I'll second that.
As long as we remember this conversation.
You are not liable.
So I heard a motion from Mr., where are you? Mr. Ward, and a second from Mr. Titus.
To increase 9555 deferred disposition to 50,000 from the 40,000 that's presented, which would be an increase of 10,000 in that revenue line. And I would request formally that we actually get the actual revenues detail from Mr. Post as he presented last year, please.
Ready? Any other questions here? Mr. Robinson, you didn't protest, did you?
I did not.
Okay.
Nope, nope.
Just want us to remember.
Just want you to remember,
Yeah.
we come up shy.
I would not do that to you.
Okay.
We got you. All right, all those in favor? It is unanimous, but not binding yet.
Right.
All right.
Can we talk capital for a second?
Yes, and Administrator Post, you heard the request for actual revenues on that one? Okay, great. And where are you looking at capital now?
Andy's budget, he has given you 3 accounts, specifically 7355 for computers and laptops, his 12.9. The detail in the tab that Mr. Post has provided us does not foot. If you follow that, help me now. My glasses fogged up, so I'm in help. 5-year, no, not 5-year, capital. You go to the capital tab in the front, you'll see it, capital by division. You go to 1015, computers and laptops, they're showing 10.8. I would just make sure that Mr. Post notes that it's actually should be the 12.9 that we just approved. Likewise, he lists the copier lease for 5,000. Andy just detailed with us that that is an account 5345. The account number is missing there. Lastly, 7325 furniture. Andy just detailed to us $1,600 worth of detail that's actually not in this document. You make those 3 adjustments, Mr. Post, that'll get Andy's division correct.
And so the capital plan just reflects the expenditures towards capital.
Correct. Correct. And this is nothing to do with.
It's not
you.
a separate line or-
What I'm assuming here is the fact is you had dialogue at the start of this with everything back and forth with Mr. Post. It's just not footed to what ultimately had played out in the budget.
Sure.
That's all I'm understanding.
Mr.
I
Titus?
just have a question on that, just refresh me, when we're showing the 2 laptops, there must be more in that budget line than just 2 laptops. When you're gonna spend 12.
9.
Where do you see 2 laptops?
Well, I mean, obviously, you got, it says computer laptops, so I mean, there's $10,800.
Yeah, Andy, that was my point originally. I'm sorry,
If
Mr.
it's high,
Titus.
if it's lower, you said, so in your actual budget,
Yep.
there's more than just laptops, there's more in there.
Yeah.
With the Surface Pros, or
Yeah,
is that where Mr. Ward was making the observation? I
Well,
broke
we
it
have
down
to
better.
make $10,800 in computers, and you had meant that that's what your line item was gonna spend that money on, was 12,000.
Yeah, if,
Computers,
when,
There's gotta be more to it than, where there's a difference here, I guess that's what I wanna.
The 12.9 Andy's detailed that it's 6 to 7 Microsoft Surface Pro tablets with docking stations, software, monitors, scanners, keyboards, and mouse, which will total up to his estimate to the 12.9 that he's presented.
Right, but it wouldn't go as a capital, just the computers themselves would be listed in the capital budget, not what goes along with them?
My interpretation of what I'm seeing here on this content, Mr. Titus, is that it's everything that's in that account, because it's the 7375, which is a capital account, and should be the total amount listed.
Yeah, okay.
It's interesting to me. I have always envisioned capital accounts as being an account set aside for a major financial cost that is coming down the road, and you just contribute to it, and then when the necessity for the improvement occurred, you would pay out of that account and not have to have a lump, have to go back to your general account and have a lump expenditure. What it looks like we're doing with this capital account is we're just reflecting what I've got in my normal expenditures and identifying them as capital, so that we've distinguished it or delineated it away from all the other expenditures. But so I'm happy to do it. I just never, conceptually, I've never thought about it that way. It does kind of remind me, is this a good time for a story? When I first did my own budget as a district attorney within Androscoggin County, for some reason, people said to me, do you have a capital expenditure you want to do? And we had just moved into the office abutting the courthouse, and so we wanted a door that was on our second floor to go into the second floor of the courthouse, so we could just come and go instead of go outside and go around. And so I said, well, that would be great. We should set aside money for that. And then I forgot all about it. And I was sitting here, and I was doing a budget hearing once, and somebody said to me, well, what about the $10,000 for a door? And I had all these visions of a door in my head, but none of it had anything to do with that crossway into the courthouse. And I was like, what are you talking about? And it took them 10 minutes to explain to me what I had said we needed money for. Didn't do that this time, I'll tell you that, but,
Wow.
and
You've
maybe
come
it's not
far.
that good a story. I take
Maybe
it back.
most improved is the award we'll hand out? I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know.
man, I should have
Great story, though.
stopped talking.
All right, we've
Madam
got you
Chair?
for two, oh yeah,
Could I
Mr.
just
Carroll.
ask, Larry, is there a policy that states that items greater than $10,000 are going to last longer than 5 years as capital expenditure?
Generally, we use 5,000.
5,000.
That's the
So-
general.
I mean, something that's a furniture replacement at 2,000
Shouldn't
shouldn't
hit
show
the
up
list.
in that list.
I agree.
Right, yeah, it
does.
shouldn't. It does because they,
What does this mean? Right.
Yeah.
right.
So, yeah, so then the furniture line that you referenced, Mr. Ward, would not display on here.
Agreed, but
Yeah.
it's
When I first got here,
differently because it's all over the place.
But it's going to be consistent through all
Yes,
the other.
it's,
when I first got here, anything over $500 was considered capital, and we kind of, but still, and we're working away from that, but, yeah, we need to.
Well, and Mr. Ward, I think you're educating me. When I understand, I am learning those parameters, and we'll make sure that it's reflected in that capital line,
By all
so
means.
that they're always there.
to the same point, if you go to the 5-year plan tab, their amounts, to Mr. Kroll's point, they're less than $5,000. They shouldn't be there.
Right. You're absolutely right.
I'm encouraged because I'm not seeing Dave's boilers still going through a 5-year plan, but let's take the immaterial stuff off here too.
All right,
That was a left turn, people.
that's okay. Lead us through 1018, joint budget.
1018, the joint budget, because I have 3 counties, there are some costs that we're able to save money by pooling all of the resources together of the 3 counties and then buying or paying for whatever those costs are. In this case, you can see off to the side what it is. Most of this has to do with the prosecutors' conference, as well as the purchase of Ferticos, which is our books that have all the Title 29A, the motor vehicle statutes and the criminal codes, and we purchase in bulk and then distribute to all the staff and the attorneys. This entire budget is a net zero. We did not increase the line, we just kept it constant. For what we did last year, we would like to do this year. What? No increase?
Make the motion to keep this budget as is before he changes his mind.
I'll second it.
I've got a motion from Mr. Ward, and I think I heard Mr. Pelletier jump in there?
Yes.
Awesome. To preserve this line as is, any questions, feelings, thoughts? All those in favor? Unanimous, that was easy. And we move to 1019 victim witness.
1019 is yet another example of a staff position that, because funding is coming from a different source than just the general fund, it is broken away from the other staff members. It is a long-standing existing position within my office. It's been there for the 20 years I've been in District 3. However, it is funded by a federal grant in part. And if you look at line 1019 on revenues, you will see that there is a $55,000 grant that comes in. 1/3 of that goes towards this position, and then 1/3 goes to Franklin County, and 1/3 goes to Oxford County. But because it is partially funded by that grant, it is kept out separate. But other than that, and I also think this might be the one that had the increase in dental that everybody keeps seeing because of a change in plan. This is a position that's existed. There's no changes beyond the normal changes that would occur with an employee when they change their dental plan, and the funding source has been constant.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr.
I
Ward.
also caught in that same line, Andy, the fact is increase in Main State going up and FICA going down. Is that also just a benefit change as well?
I am going to have to defer to Ms. Proctor on that.
Yeah.
So it's benefit choices amongst the
Right.
person. Was it a change in the person or just their benefits?
And I think, I don't think this one's changed. I think it's just the benefit change.
Okay, that's listening dot. That was all that question was for.
Anything else on this budget, folks?
1019, witness advocate revenue for 55,000. I recommend that stay as is as well. I would make the motion with that revenue item that this budget remain at 97,126.98 and the 55,000 on the revenue.
Motion from Mr. Ward, second from Mr. Rennie. Great. Any further discussion? All those in favor? It is unanimous, 9-0, I believe. That's it for you
Well-
tonight.
You all have been very tolerant, thank you. And I'm certain I can come back if you have any questions or if anything surfaces as we go through the process.
Sounds great, thank you. We're going to move on to building and facilities, 1040. We'll give Dave a second to come get oriented.
I'm going to go this way.
Yes,
All right. You guys have any questions offhand, or?
I have
one.
We'll start with Mrs. Cesare.
Sorry. So you may go through this. So you have line item, what is it, 7205, where you're building and building improvement. You had a budget of almost $80,000, yet you've only expended like 27,000, no, wait a minute, only $1,000.
So most of the year is difficult to get contractors in, but we're going to be doing flooring and the front door for the sheriff's department real soon. So because school season has started, the contractors are not more available because they work quite a bit in the summertime. They're going to be doing some more projects coming up real soon.
Okay, so you are going to
Yes.
spend it, because my question was going to be, instead of putting in the additional 25 in your reserve, are you just going to roll what you're not using over, but you're going to be using that?
Yes,
Okay.
normally, so there are some that I've asked for in the past, essentially like roofing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll request 50,000, and if there's change, I'll roll that over to the following year, because roofing is something that we do quite a bit.
Okay, thank you.
I will, that's a good segue into the fact that he originally had 50,000 for roofing and 20,000 for floors in this budget, and we took that 50 and 20, 70,000 out to put into the ARPA money because that's eligible under the portion of it, so.
Mr. Ward?
I wasn't seeing it. Professional fees, Dave, what is consistently being paid there that is not budgeted?
So essentially, we pay for the architect to work on the heating system grant that we're going to be doing, the $5.5 million. We had to pay an architect to do, not architect, an engineer to write that up, and that's part of the fees.
Okay. So are we anticipating anything for 2022 for future, and should it be budgeted?
I think all that's going to come out of the new,
ARPA funds as well?
yes.
Okay, I'm good with that then.
Where is that showing up?
If you look at 4015,
No, I'm talking about the revenue from this ARPA money.
it's, as we mentioned at the last meeting, it is completely separate from anything you have before you in the budget.
It's on,
So
yeah.
it's in the budget, but they're gonna use that funding to pay for it.
It's not, it's zeroed out. But it had historically been at zero, and we had expenditures in it,
Well, it
so.
shows expended $5,600 year to date.
And now that will move, that expenditure will move into the ARP funds.
That'll go away, so we won't even see that.
Correct.
Last thing, because it's a target, Dave, I'm gonna let you talk to the elephant in the room with 7,300 capital reserve.
So that I'm going to hand off to the treasurer? Nope. she's not here.
Essentially what happened was, when we looked at the amount of dollars on the building improvement that's taken out to put into the ARP money, and looking at the fact that we have severely depleted the capital improvement money that we have had in this building account, the thinking was it's a good time to start, even in a small way, to rebuild that account again, so that we do have some dollars in there for future. So,
Madam Chair, I would make the motion that that line item go to zero.
All right, I have a motion from Mr.
What
Ward.
line number again?
It's 7,300, next page. Seconded by Mr. Rennie to zero out that line. Any comments from administration on that? Besides what you've already said? No? Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Mr. Stefanik, was your hand up for opposed?
No, I was opposed.
You were opposed, thank you. Okay, how many of us are there? There's 9. So the motion passes 6-3.
You opposed?
4.
You were in favor of it?
Yes.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry, things are happening here.
That's what I saw too. It isn't binding at all. It's the fact that we're gonna make that note and revisit this anyways.
Yep, okay. So that is going to bring us down to, do a little calculator action. 2, 3, 6, 10 minus 25,000. So I see the new number would be 398,610 for the total county building budget. Okay. Motion from Mr. Rennie,
I will second that.
second from Mr. Ward. Further discussion? Mr. Titus?
Just real quick, couple of questions. Your repairs building, it says line number 4610. Obviously not a lot, so a lot would have been in there normally is going to be ARPA numbers, or is it, any of that could be used for that? The ARPA funding? Repairs of the building, 4610.
I think it has to be projects that are relevant to the
Yeah.
pandemic, and so these would just be
Our
regular.
heating system's not relative to the pandemic. Like $6 million we're going to spend for air conditioning.
I didn't set the rules.
This,
Ventilation.
right. There are two, and there's specific requirements for that, and then there are two pots of money for it. The first one is the main general requirements. The second one is any dollars that you, revenue that was lost during that time. And we do have about $800,000 that we determined was lost. Actually, Clarice calculated it, and I calculated it, and we came $3 apart.
So you said, how much was it, you came as a loss, was it 800,000?
About 800,
Lost
yeah.
revenue.
And some of that we're looking at, but you can use that for buildings and so on, and we're looking at doing some of that. But then there are some issues that neither one will actually touch, so.
I'm sure that we've gone through that, all these, and I was also looking at heating, repairs for the heating, that kind of thing.
Yeah, normally repairs are just that, repairs, they're not.
The filtration of the air,
Pardon?
unless it has something to do with the filtration of the air through the heating system.
Yeah, this amount generally is, for whatever, for window falls out, then you replace it and, those kinds of just general repairs as opposed to.
Okay. Now, you said 800,000 in lost revenue, so we can use lost revenues, this money for lost revenues. You said, right?
Mhm.
So we're taking, we have huge lost revenues, if you talked to us on the opening night. So we're projecting that in 2022. Can any of that money be used based on continued lost revenues?
You
Because of the
have,
pandemic?
you have to calculate that lost revenue at the
Yeah.
beginning of each year, and we're not sure. Actually, we were both surprised and primarily it was because of the way the state funded the jail and what we received versus, the last year when that money went away. So,
But are you asking if we could replenish fund balance with
What I'm
800,000
saying
of it?
is we have $600,000 in revenue losses, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at a 12% increase in the levy. Why can't this money be used to replace future losses as well? Because if we have a continuation of losses, we should be able to use that money to replace those losses.
primarily because the rules that the feds made
That's correct.
that we don't have any say over.
So we can use them for past losses, but not future losses due to the pandemic.
Yeah, you have to use it for certain, they're specified as for certain things you can use it for. And even though it's more than the rest of the money, you can use it for a lot of building issues and so on. You can, but there are certain things that you just can't use it for.
I do understand that.
Yeah.
Mr. Kroll?
I think two questions, one to follow up on Counselor, I'm sorry, former Counselor Taylor. But so the revenue could come in and offset the overall expense. You could take the $800,000 and reduce the budget by $800,000, because that's unrestricted dollars that are coming in as a result of lost revenue. My question would be, on the lost revenue, the $800,000, is that total? So if you look at the total county budget, the total lost revenue is 800,000? Or is that just adding up different line items, separate line items that may have had a loss? Overall, what was the total loss?
It's overall, that was overall.
Okay, I
Yeah,
just
you
wanted
have
make
to.
sure that was clear. I thought I heard the line items with the jail and different.
Yeah, it came from a couple of line items, but you have to take the overall.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And you mentioned part of that was due to the way the state funded the jail. Was that an impact of COVID, or that was just the legislatures?
That had to do with the change in the way the state did their funding. We used to be able to get what we call the supplemental funding at the beginning of the fiscal year. They did away with that, and you had to go and beg for it at the end of the year and so on. So there was several factors came into that.
Okay, and so what part of the 800,000 is losses due to the pandemic versus losses due to funding formula?
Essentially, what they did, they tell us we had to go to December of 2019.
Yeah.
and look at the revenue, and then go to December of 2020 and look at your revenues and subtract one from the other.
Mr. Rennie?
So what
Can you give him your
portion
mic?
of the 800,000 what portion of the 800,000 is directly correlated to the COVID losses?
My understanding is you don't have to directly take that lost revenue. They don't make you calculate out, okay, how much was from COVID and how much was from this. They made the assumption that because of the lost revenue, the feds made the assumption that it is, and help me out if I'm wrong, but, of course. The feds made the assumption that if you have a lost revenue, that it is because of COVID, and they don't want you to have to prove one way or the other. So that was just a way that they did their calculations.
Follow up?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, can the county assume, based on, within the rules of the ARPA funding, that the 800,000 or whatever the amount is all COVID-related and use money from ARPA to offset the losses of that $800,000?
We are able to, but then there are again certain requirements that you have to spend that on, and we can get that for you next time, the listing of how they list it out. You know,
Are those guidelines available online?
are they what?
Are they available on,
Are
they available
yeah,
online?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they should be on that, the interim final rule that the feds put out.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
welcome.
just for clarification.
Yeah.
You just need to go to the U.S. Treasury's office, and the interim rules are right there.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll. Mr. Titus?
Yeah, one quick follow-up. Now, it was, I think, last week when we talked about, you had mentioned, or maybe the sheriff, I remember you, I think you had mentioned that we lost money in the jail because we didn't have as many prisoners. We didn't get reimbursed because we didn't have the population of prisoners. And now we know that's primarily caused by COVID, and it's still going on because I read in the paper today, they're asking law enforcement, hey, you know, you don't have to, don't send us to, send somebody to the jail. We're having a lot of reimbursement issues there. We can't collect that going forward because of COVID?
This particular year, of course, the jail is on a July-June fiscal year, and this particular year, money that we just got, the state had $18 million, and so then they divided it amongst all of the counties based on their inmate population. But because everybody's inmate population was down, that still, they still had the $18 million that they gave everybody. So actually, we made out better this year than we have.
But I'm not talking about state, I'm talking about the ARPA fund, using some of that money to reimburse ourselves for lost revenue due to COVID.
Is that an allowable?
Again, there are certain things that you can use it for.
So if you lose
Is
money,
that one of them?
and that's one of them.
You can't just say, okay, we're going to cut the budget, you know, we're going to put that $800,000 as revenue in the budget and offset. It has to be used for certain things.
Mr.
And
Kroll?
again, those things are expanded from the normal ARPA money, but they still, there's still a lot of restrictions there.
Mr. Kroll?
I think it would be good to get some clarification, because I believe the revenue loss funding, you could take that $800,000, and you don't have the same restrictions as if you were doing, you know, this
The
eligibility
22 million.
requirements that you have to hit.
Right.
That loss revenue could come in and offset. So I think it'd be important to get that clarification, because I just don't want people to think you can't transfer that, because I believe you can, under those guidelines, under lost revenue, you don't have to meet the same eligibility requirements.
I think that's really critical for
So-
this process.
So I think
here.
it'd be good to get that clarification.
Yeah.
I know Auburn did not have any lost revenue, so we're not looking at it as closely, but I know Maine Municipal Association does have that all available. And Larry, you remember MMA?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you could reach out to Kate Dufour,
Yeah.
and she would give you the clarification on that. so.
Yeah, I think that could play a big role here, so thank you. Thanks, everyone, for digging into that a little bit.
To the point that
Yes.
on that, we have at a later date, the ARPA.
That's on the
discussion.
29th.
The fact is, nowhere is on the list that Mr. Post actually talked about. Is there anything associated with lost revenues at all?
Correct.
So digging into that, if that's a potential $800,000 item that's still outstanding, I would like to have that discussion as part of that, when we hear that, by all means.
And thank you, as always, to Chair Christianer for being here to hopefully, if we find that out here and are able to relate that back to the commission before they take these expenditures, maybe that will make a difference there. So thank you for looking into that. Any further, sorry, Mr. Cody, this is eating up your time. Our apologies, but any further questions on Mr. Cody's budget 1040, which is current, we already have a motion, my apologies, for $398,610. Anything further? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Passes 8-1. Who else was opposed?
This is my easiest
Mr. Larry?
presentation.
I mean, Mr. Pelletier, you weren't opposed, right?
No.
No. Tony, oh, all right, so you're free, you're set free. Doug's up next, 1060 IT.
How you guys, everybody?
Fantastic.
As David did, I'd start out by saying, do you have any specific questions that you'd like to ask, or do you just want me to present line by line and discuss? Hearing nothing, I'll assume that you just want me to go line by line.
Yes, but I do have a quick question.
Sure.
Can you just remind us of the history of your department when you came on board?
I'm not sure how to respond to that. There was nobody in the department when I
Right.
came on board. There was my
But
predecessor.
what was the timing for that? That's
I'm
really-
sorry. I started here on June 1st of last year.
Okay, great.
So, and actually, that's a very, thank you for the segue. It gives me an opportunity to say that there may be some questions that you have about my budget from 2021, that I would only just reflect that I'd only been on staff for, I think, about a month at the time that it was time to start putting that budget together. So there may have been some assumptions that I hit well on and others that I didn't maybe hit as well on, and they may be relevant to questions that you may ask. If I may, I'd like to drop to just account 4015, the IT consulting, if that's okay. At the time that I came before you last year, I had a vision of going out to a bid for what I would call a co-managed service contract of roughly the line item, the dollar amount that I put in the budget last year. And as it has turned out, my experience has been, that it's difficult to find organizations that market a co-managed service arrangement of that size and scope. Most of them that you go to, they're looking for a little bit bigger of a recurring commitment. So as a result, what's happened with that money in the budget is that I've gone out for individual tasks, projects, and things like that I needed some help with, rather than being a part of a large, one-year managed services account. I've gone out and engaged as needed for things that we needed some help with, and that's turned out to me to be a very good resource to have. And the number that I projected in the 2022 request really just reflects what I expect, or what I project through the end of 2021 to have spent on that model. Because it's worked out so well for me, that's why I'm requesting that amount. It's really the only second set of hands that I have, that, other than David and his group, that provide me with some support. This is if I need to go out and hire an engineer that has a skill set that I don't have in my background, and that's what affords me the ability to do that. Any questions on that line item? The next line item is the telephone, and here's an area that I think in another year I'll be able to speak with some more confidence in my knowledge of that number, but basically that's just a projection of where my expenditures are going to wind up being at the end of the year. It's a little bit less than what we had budgeted a year ago, and I think it's going to be right in line at the end of the year. Lease agreement was a legacy from something that came here before. I'm not sure what we can do about getting that line off the budget, but I'll skip over it. Repairs to equipment is rather interesting. I think what I did last year, I remember what I did last year was I took a look at what our expenditures had been and they were projected for the rest of the year, and I sort of flatlined that for the year. This year, I have spent most of that money, or the majority of that money I've spent rehabilitating a couple of key pieces of equipment. Now that those are rehabilitated and back in service, I won't have those expenses next year, so I'm projecting a reduction in repairs and equipment next year. So that's why I brought that down to $3,750. Service contracts, on the other hand, there are some things that I discovered through the course of the months intervening that were still in use and that did not have service contracts on them, so they had to provide for that in the 2021 budget. It's about a $1,100, increase in that line. Similarly, a small amount in maintenance contract on hardware and software. There are one or two things that I encountered in the months intervening that I did not know we were still using that we added coverage, and I've provided some coverage for that. Registration enrollment, that's just anticipating that perhaps we may start going back to opportunities to meet with our peers in different kinds of meeting settings. So I've requested $500 be restored to that budget to support that. Office supplies, as you can see, I'm already a little bit over on office supplies, and so I'm requesting a little bit of an increase on that to reflect reality in what I've actually done. Computer supplies, the difference there of $600 is all attributable to the fact that I added the tape backup solution this year to our hyper-virtualization environment. And every year we're going to use 5 tapes that will wind up going into a permanent archive, and that's the cost of those 5 tapes. Let's see, the last item is computer hardware and software, and this actually is directly germane to some of the discussion that was being held a few minutes ago. That number would have been, and Larry can probably, if he's willing to, tell you that that number was quite a bit higher on my first submissions to Larry. But in discussion, we realized that some of the projects that I definitely think we need to do will be likely eligible for the ARPA funding. Part of the offset of that $800 and whatever $1,000. We have some projects in line that we think, we took it off the operating budget for 2022 in light of the fact that we expect that those projects will be eligible for some of the ARPA funding. So if I may step out of my lane for just a moment, the discussion earlier about that $800,000, whether that could be used to directly go back into a revenue account, be aware that some of what you're seeing, the numbers that you're seeing in my budget at least, and I'm sure David's as well, we've already anticipated things that we would have put in this budget that we now think we assume that we would be able to use ARPA funds to cover those things. So, but for that, these numbers would be bigger. And I think that brings me to the bottom of my.
For those 3 projects,
Pardon?
for those 3 projects that were taken out and are under the ARPA funding currently, do they have any future ongoing costs associated with them?
Minor. Maintenance contracts would probably hit next year's budget. So generally, when you buy something new, you get the maintenance and support for a year, and then the year following, you'll wind up picking up that expense as an operating cost. But they're not significant. They're generally in the 10% of the purchase price range, 10 to 15%, depending on how good you are at your negotiating.
Great. Mr. Ward?
On that, anything last year in the 43 budgeted number, was there anything ARPA related in that?
I'm sorry, I'm not following. Which budgeted number?
7375, 4330, 332 budgeted. Any of those projects that you put in last year, were they ARPA related or that?
No, none of that. That's actually pretty much going to be expended by the end of the year, but none of it is
So
something
what
that comes.
my next question, I guess, would be is 5-year replacement, that's the average cost that you're associating?
So it's interesting because if you're asking about replacement for things like computers and individual small items like that, those are generally handled at the department budget level.
Okay.
And I don't know whether they're expensed or capitalized. And to the discussion that was with Andy when he was here earlier, my approach, and if I'm incorrect about this, the reason we capitalize something is so that we can show those amortization costs over the course of the useful life of that equipment. So if I'm going to spend $10,000 on something this year and it's going to last for 5 years, we're going to amortize it out $2,000 in the next 5 years as expense. So that's really what triggers whether I put something. And also, I don't want to go too far afield here, but there are actually, what's in that 2022 request for line item 7375, not realizing at the time that that was exactly capital, that it was what it says, which is computer software and hardware. There are some items that are in that account that I think we might have a little bit of an issue in terms of whether they should be in that line or in another line as expense items. There are some things in there that are $1,000, $2,000, that they are computer and software and hardware, and at the time that we made this submission, we didn't realize that significance, that line item is the capital line item. So, we may run into something with regard to that. But it's the minority of that number. That number is almost all the second, or this one will be the third year of the 5-year lease agreement on the server infrastructure that we bought about a year ago.
You nailed it with the last sentence. That was the listening dot. What's in that is the lease agreement for the 5th-year payment, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kroll?
I just suggest for the software systems that you're looking at, purchasing out of ARPA funds, include in those agreements a 3-year maintenance that can be rolled into those ARPA funds, so we don't see those funds until
Yeah.
2025.
Yeah, that's actually thank you for that. That's a strategy we worked to some success when I was at the casino, that if you were able to acquire something through a capital expenditure, that you roll as much maintenance as policy and the rules allowed, and we'll do that very thing. Thank you.
Awesome.
I had one last question on this budget.
Go ahead.
Again, for the listening dot, wages, 3120 was, and I think this is a question more for Clarice, was the 2021 budget figure
Yes.
partial year?
Let me go back, and we ended up, we were without a IT person for a while. We ended up having to pay more for IT than we had been. And quite frankly, last year, this year, he should have got a raise and didn't due to various circumstances, plus my stupidity. And so we're making up for actually 2 years of raises there. And I will tell you, he's not only worth every cent of it, but then some. And in looking at the number that I put in for 2022, in looking at the wage scale for counties, he's still $4,000 under the average, so.
So fair to say on this one that he is not within the 3%?
That's
because we're
correct.
trying to catch up with key staff.
Yes, we're trying to at least keep him.
Okay.
I don't know if you were looking at Mr. Ward, but Mr. Cody was nodding.
He's taken a tremendous load off of me. Having him is a godsend.
You all are embarrassing
You
me
didn't
now.
hear that?
We can't see you blush under the mask. It's okay.
Flattery will get you everywhere, right?
If it gets my budget approved, I'll be happy for that.
Further questions on 1060? Mr. Titus?
Thank you. Thank you, by the way, for delivering a budget that's actually less than it was.
Circumstances, I'd love to take credit for it, but it's more about circumstances. than As I said, if it weren't for the ARPA money, then this budget would not be as good as it looks.
But I had a couple of questions. I don't know if you're out of the room. Andy Robinson had talked about some Adobe software that he was paying $1,000 for.
Yep.
And he didn't know of any blanket lease agreements
Yeah.
or whatever that we could get.
I think.
Nobody else but him uses Adobe.
Well, I wouldn't say that. What I am aware of is that the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's not here to really answer directly to it, they do use some copies of that, but that's been administered by their office administration and not been something that I've taken care of yet. In a future year, if it makes sense, then I think it would make sense to consolidate those things. The other thing is, Andy is probably purchasing perpetual licenses rather than the service model, the subscription model, which is what I believe, again, being hands-off from that.
I have enough of what's under one umbrella. Well, I was just saying, my point, I guess, is we'd like to have us do more consolidating, whether it be Microsoft Office or whatever license for everybody in the building. If you can get an Adobe license that umbrellas everything, he can have his Pro, whatever,
Sure.
because it's under the same company.
Yeah, and again, not
We
wanting.
could save money, so.
Yeah, and not wanting to go, again, too far afield, the topic of Microsoft licensing has been something I've been paying attention to just recently. We're still running on version 2013 of the Office suite.
Yeah,
And
I think it's time to look at that.
And I've been working on.
Can pay for that and upgrade there to get.
Well, that's a possibility, and I will look at that as well. One of the things I've been looking at as well there is whether we buy more perpetual licenses or we switch to an operating cost model where we subscribe our users to those services, and then they're always continually entitled to the latest versions as they come along, not to mention the other benefits that come from the subscription model. It may be more expensive. The other thing is it's more of a shock to the senses in terms of converting from a capital thought process to an operating thought process. But in the end, you pay me now, pay me later, and it may make more sense in the future for us to go with the services subscription rather than the capital.
Yeah, I mean, I know in the city of Auburn, they originally, a while back, changed over to a one, I don't know, it's a cloud-based
Yeah.
system that everybody had, that was entitled to, because you had to pay it for every user, but it was cheaper than everybody buying their own.
Yeah, and again, I just frankly haven't had time to put pencil to paper to really understand what the numbers would look like, which is why I haven't thought about bringing that to this year's budget cycle.
And then the other thing, real quick, is an observation, service contracts. I assume that's repair, maintenance, and all that, so you have a contract on a laptop or a...
Actually, no, to the contrary, a lot of that is things like our cloud-based antivirus and anti-malware and patching software. That's a number in there, as well as the Microsoft that you were just talking about. We do have our email services as cloud subscriptions through a local vendor, and that number appears in that line item.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know if anybody else
Like
caught
you
this,
wanted to
but
say
in the
something.
middle of all of this computer savvy talk, he's talking about putting pencil to paper. And
There's still time there's still room for that.
All right, folks. Any other questions on 1060? Any motions, people? Yeah.
I'll second it.
I have a motion from Mr. Rennie, seconded by Mrs. Cesare. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It is unanimous.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Just quickly, does anyone need a break? We have been at it for over 90 minutes now. The last couple are pretty quick usually, though. Everyone good? Okay, we'll march on to 1025 treasurer. And can you just grab that mic, Clarice?
What's that?
Can you just move the mic towards you?
Oh.
Thank you. I'm just trying to
tried
make
to
Dave
avoid
happy.
it.
It's my only goal tonight.
I try to avoid using that thing. So quite a few of my lines have gone down. I've brought down printing and engraving, training and education, printing and reproducing. We never seem to really expend what we budget, so I've cut those out. And let's see, I've brought back lodging. As you know, because of the pandemic, all meetings and trainings were gone, so hoping next year they're going to be back. At least I've budgeted for one of my conferences. And also the other big one is my copier printer is really reaching its life, and it's doesn't scan well. It's just really in bad shape. So I have budgeted $6,000 to replace that. And my IT, and my IV, which is my software for my accounting, that they've increased my support on that, so I've increased that.
Any questions on 1025 treasurer's budget?
Yes.
Mr. Titus, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I just want to ask you, on account number 3120, salaries and wages, showing an 8% increase thereabouts.
Yeah, that includes some COLA, the steps, because of how long they've been there. There's a grade change, and there was an adjustment for department head.
Did everybody in that department receive the $5,000 increase?
Yes,
And you have two other people yourself.
I do, yep.
You all set?
Clarification question on that?
Mr. Ward?
Clarice, what's the process of doing a reclass from a 5 to a 6 for one of your people?
Responsibilities, we relook at the job description. And I have particularly one who's taken on a lot of other work, higher-end work, and she's just not at that, being paid for that work. So we're,
Does that, I'm assuming that goes up to the commissioners and they Les, when you do a reclass of an employee, how does that work?
That comes to the administrator.
So the administrator has the discretion associated with that? Okay.
Did you have further questions, Mr. Titus?
No, I'm all set.
Okay, Mr. Ward, did you have a
No, that
different?
was the one that
That's
just,
the
it
same
clearly,
one.
it clearly is highlighted that it's 8%
Yeah.
versus the other, and so Clarice has answered my question.
Great. Any other folks have questions on this budget? Anyone have a motion for me?
Make a motion that we accept or approve the $180,743 as presented.
I'll second that.
Who was that? I'm so sorry. Mr. Pelletier,
Mark.
thank you. All righty, any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous?
No.
Oh, sorry, opposed. Thank you, Mr. Titus. All right, passes 8-1. We'll move to 1090 auditing.
Yeah, auditing, I spoke with our auditors, and the amount won't change for next year, so I've locked them in.
Do I have a motion?
For discussion, I'll make the second.
All right, what?
Is it set year by year, or do you do a 3-year contract with RHR Smith? How's that work?
We are, they were on when I came on, doing our audit. We are due to go out to bid for auditing services probably for the next year.
Okay, and you do it for multiple years?
Yes.
Typically 3
Yep.
to 5?
Yep.
I have nothing with firm at all by any means. The fact is, it's just, what's that process? And
Yep.
because I know when we looked at this last year, it was a higher amount, and it was the amount that we settled on was the amount that was actually for that contract, and
Right.
you've done the same this year, so thank you.
Mr. Kroll?
Is there a mechanism, Larry, to extend that, or is it set by policy? Because of some recent retirements, we know that there are some firms that are no longer doing the audit, which impacted numerous municipalities that had to go out of state for auditing services that really increased their amounts. I'm just wondering, before we open that up, I'd rather see.
Yeah,
Is
there's
way
not
to-
a set policy. We don't have a set policy as to how long, and it has to go to bid. And we've been looking at, well, we looked this year, should we go to bid? And then we found the same as you found, that all the auditors are stopping doing municipal and county work. And so we have put that off. So, yeah.
Mine have had to go find somebody else because we were dropped. Yep.
Well, we will count our blessings. We do have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Are you okay with that being to accept?
Yep,
Great.
absolutely.
All right, all those in favor? Unanimous. We will move along to interest, another fun guessing game.
So, as you know, the interest rates for the last year have gone way down, so we actually saved a lot on our interest for the TAN. However, in speaking with our banker, who currently holds the TAN, he's expecting the rates to go back up. So I've decided to try to keep it at what we have been budgeting, just in case, because I really don't know how it's going to land.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Wood.
I'd offer her the same thing that I did with Andy, and the fact is, I'd like to make a recommendation that we land at 60, which was where 2020 was closer to landing and closer to in line associated with that, and if it goes higher, no fault to hers. I'd recommend a $20,000 reduction.
I'll second that.
Any protest?
Nope, as long as I don't get fired over it.
No, it's, it is what it is, absolutely.
Again, the memories will be long. So I've got a motion and a second to move 4505, the only line, to 60K. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous.
We keep saying memory will be long, but I heard several people say they're not coming back.
Yeah, my memory won't be. And then we have to vote on the whole budget. Sorry to do that to you all, but at 60K, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Cool and Rennie. Cool. All those in favor? Unsurprisingly unanimous as well. Great. And our last one, 2050 insurance.
I would make the motion as is. I wouldn't do that to you.
Sorry, I haven't even found the budget yet, sorry. There it is, okay.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Ward, seconded by Mr. Pelletier for the full amount, 105,000. Any discussion? Mr. Titus?
My question has to do with reimbursement. Do we get any rebates for, because of our experience is lower than expected, we got a check in the...
No, essentially, we don't go through an insurance company. We're self-insured through Maine County Commissioners Association.
There's no such thing as a refund?
Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous? All right, just a quick reminder, we'll be back here again next Wednesday, 6 PM. Hopefully, it's just as fun. I'll let folks know at the beginning if the transmission rate is substantial to high again, we'll have masks. Mr. Ward?
A couple of things noting in the binder that I'm not seeing from last year. For Mr. Post, 2022 tax levy detailed by towns with valuation proposed. I know you work on the valuation.
Okay, except that we don't have those. Normally, we get the preliminary evaluation the end of the month, 1st of October. Usually I have to call and beg them to give it to me. That's generally when it's found, so we won't have that for another.
That's fine. If you put it in for that last night when we're doing revenues and the mop-up, I would be all over it. It's just mostly that's the one soundbite that we take back to our communities. What are we looking at? That's the money shot right there. The next one is projected revenue balances. I'm sorry. Projected reserve balances detail for FY '22. You got into a discussion, and I know, at least myself, and I think I heard Mr. Titus, we're struggling with the fact that you've given us 2021 ending. Last year you projected where you thought you were going to land for FY '21. If I could get that FY '22, I think it's going to help my head get around some of the things, specifically the 150,000 for the body scanner that actually should close to fund balance. I'd like to see that is actually, that revenue, that reserve account, I apologize, would increase, but I'd like to know where you are going to land with the rest of those.
Okay.
And in that same vein, support of prisoners, you referenced a amount in what you expected in that account, and that is nowhere in the reserves. If you could actually include support of prisoners in that discussion or presentation to us, I'd also appreciate that.
Okay.
Was it one of those side discussions last year when we discovered that you had 550 associated with that? We allocated the amount for the body scanner. So I would anticipate that there would be 400,000 left in it if you're billing it.
Actually, I don't think there's going to be, because our revenues were down in every other area, so we're going to be fortunate if we'll be a little more than breaking even, but we're still waiting for, again, it'll be a couple of weeks before our audit is complete, but.
Perfect. In that regard, that was what Mr. Titus reminded me of before the meeting started, is if you have an idea of where you think you're going to be at the end of this, just for that discussion, that would be helpful.
And if there is a loss of revenue, we tap into those funds to replace.
Again, there are very specific ways that you can spend that,
I think we
as opposed to just, using it to offset budgets.
Yeah. Okay.
What is next week's agenda?
Next week, we've got Western Maine Transport, Androscoggin, Sagadahoc Extension, AvCog, Soil, Employee Benefits, the two registries, the Commissioners, and Human Resources.
That's my last question. I'll defer to the next meeting then.
Okay, great. Anything further from folks?
I have a suggestion.
Yes. let's do it.
When the presenters, could they actually, like Andrew did, actually tell us their name for, again, the new people who
Yeah.
don't know anybody?
Yeah, we
Would be
can definitely do
appreciated.
that. I
Thank
remember
you.
that from my first year too, so we'll do a little bit more formality.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks, folks, and we've got one more motion that I need to hear.
Motion to adjourn?
Everyone yelled it, all those in favor? We'll call that Rennie Pelletier for Sandy's sake. Thanks, guys, have a good night.
Thank you all.
Yeah.